Hello, and welcome to the 27th of Decem-Baron 2020. Today, I would like to read some more poems for you guys. This time, there are a few more T.S. Eliot poems that I think would be fun to read, but first, another poem that I have committed to memory, Jabberwocky. This might be a bit familiar to more of you. Jabberwocky is a shorter poem than the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It is of course a lot more silly and ridiculous, because essentially Lewis Carroll made up a bunch of words, and some of those words we even still use today. For example, especially in fantasy fantasy, you may have heard of a Vorpal sword, right? I'm not 100% sure. I think Vorpal was made up in this particular poem, Jabberwocky. But yeah, there's I've committed this to memory, and I'm going to perform it for you. So, sorry, I guess I feel a bit stiff today. Okay, here we go. 'Twas brilling, and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his Vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the Tum-Tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And, as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the Vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he came galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy! O frabjous day, callooh, callay! He chortled in his joy. 'Twas brilling, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe. So, that is Jabberwocky. A very delightful poem, I think. But yeah, they let's see. I like performing that poem because it's fun to read, it's fun to perform and everything. And so now I'm going to move on to some other poems from a book titled Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. This is a series of poems by T.S. Eliot, the same person who wrote the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And if you are at all familiar with the musical Cats, which had a bit of an unfortunate film adaptation recently, there's a much better filming of it from the 80s or 90s or something. But I have also seen a couple of performances of the musical Cats, and I like it. I like the musical personally. It's just this silly kind of hot mess that is just very fun to sing and watch. So and it's all based on this book of poems. Also, the musical was written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, so can't really go wrong there. In any case, this is where I'm not going to sing the songs. I'm going to read the poems because I think more people recognize the songs than they do the poems themselves. I'm not sure how many of these poems I'm going to read. There are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It looks like about 14 poems in there. Not sure if I'll read all of them. We'll see. But almost all of them, I think most if not all of them, are actually in the musical Cats. I'll just start from the beginning and go onward. So, the naming of cats. The naming of cats is a difficult matter. It isn't just one of your holiday games. You may think at first I'm mad as a hatter when I tell you a cat must have 3 different names. First of all, there's the name that the family use daily, such as Peter, Augustus, Alonzo, or James. such as Victor or Jonathan, George or Bill Bailey. All of them simple, everyday names. A little bit of a side note here. I'm not sure who would call their cat Bill Bailey or George or whatever. Anyway. Moving on. There are fancier names if you think they sound sweeter. Some for the gentleman, some for the dame, such as Plato, Admetus, Electra, Demeter. But all of them sensible, everyday names. But I tell you, a cat needs a name that's particular, a cat that's peculiar and more dignified. Else how can he keep his tail perpendicular or spread out his whiskers or cherish his pride? Of names of this kind, I can give you a quorum, such as Munsketrap, Coxo, or Coricopat, such as Bombularina, or else Jellylorum, names that never belong to more than one cat. But above and beyond, there's still one name left over, and that is the name that you never will guess. That name that no human research that discover, but the cat himself knows, and will never confess. When you notice a cat in profound meditation, the reason I tell you is always the same. His mind is engaged in a rapt contemplation of the thought of his name. His ineffable, affable, and ineffable, deep and inscrutable, singular name. What we got here? Okay. Next, the Old Gumby Cat. I have a Gumby Cat in mind. Her name is Jenny Anydots. Her coat is of the tabby kind, with tiger stripes and leopard spots. All day she sits upon the stair or on the steps or on the mat. She sits and sits and sits and sits, and that's what makes a Gumby Cat. But when the day's hustle and bustle is done, then the Gumby Cat's work is but hardly begun. And when all the family is in bed and asleep, she tucks up her skirts to the basement to creep. She is deeply concerned with the ways of the mice. Their behavior's not good and their manners not nice. So when she has got them lined up on the matting, she teaches them music, crocheting, and tatting. I have a Gumby Cat in mind. Her name is Jenny Anydots. Her equal would be hard to find. She likes the warm and sunny spots. All day she sits beside the hearth, or on the bed, or on my hat. She sits and sits and sits and sits, and that's what makes a Gumby Cat. But when the day's hustle and bustle is done, then the Gumby Cat's work is but hardly begun, and she finds that the mice will not ever keep quiet. She is sure it is due to irregular diet, and believing that nothing is done without trying, she gets right to work with her baking and frying. She makes them a mouse cake of bread and dried peas, and a beautiful fry of lean bacon and cheese. I have a Gumby Cat in mind. Her name is Jenny Anydots. The curtain rod she likes to wind and tie it into sailor knots. She sits upon the windowsill or anything that's smooth and flat. She sits and sits and sits and sits. And that's what makes a Gumby Cat. But when the day's hustle and bustle is done, then the Gumby Cat's work is but hardly begun. She thinks about the cockroaches that just need employment to prevent them from idle and wanton destroyment. So she's formed from that lot of disorderly louts a troop of well-disciplined, helpful Boy Scouts, with a purpose in life and a good deed to do, and she's even created a beetle's tattoo. So for Old Gumby Cats, let us now give 3 cheers, on whom well-ordered households depend, it appears. Next is Growltiger's Last Stand, which I believe was going to be in the musical Cats, but didn't end up making it. Here we go. Growltiger was a bravo cat who traveled on a barge. In fact, he was the roughest cat that ever loomed at large. From Gravesend up to Oxford, he pursued his evil aims, rejoicing in his title of the Terror of the Thames. His manners and appearance did not calculate to please. His coat was torn and seedy. He was baggy at the knees. One ear was somewhat missing, no need to tell you why, and he scowled upon a hostile world from one forbidding eye. The cottages of Rotherhithe knew something of his fame. At Hammersmith and Putney, people shuddered at his name. They would fortify the hen house, lock up the silly goose, when the rumor ran along the shore, Growltiger's on the loose. Woe to the weak canary that fluttered from its cage. Woe to the pampered Pekingese that faced Growltiger's rage. Woe to the bristly bandicoot that lurks on foreign ships, and woe to any cat on whom Growltiger came to grips. But most to cats of foreign race his hatred had been vowed. To cats of foreign name and race no quarter was allowed. The Persian and the Siamese regarded him with fear, because it was the Siamese had mauled his missing ear. Now, on a peaceful summer night, all nature seemed at play. The tender moon was shining bright. The barge at Molesey lay, all in the balmy moonlight it lay rocking on the tide, and Growltiger was disposed to show his sentimental side. His bucko mate, Grumbuskin, long since had disappeared, for to the bell at Hampton he had gone to wet his beard. And his bosun, Tumble Brutus, he too had stolen away. In the yard behind the lion he was prowling for his prey. In the forepeak of the vessel Growltiger sate alone, concentrating his attention on the Lady Griddlebone, and his raffish crew were sleeping in their barrels and their bunks, as the Siamese came creeping in their sampans and their junks. Growltiger had no eye or ear for aught but Griddlebone, and the lady seemed enraptured by his manly baritone. Disposed to relaxation and awaiting no surprise, but the moonlight shone reflected from 1,000 bright blue eyes, and closer still and closer the sampans circled round, and yet from all the enemy there was not heard a sound. The lovers sang their last duet in danger of their lives, for the foe was armed with toasting forks and cruel carving knives. Then Gilbert gave the signal to his fierce Mongolian horde. With a frightful burst of fireworks, the Chinks they swarmed aboard. Abandoning their sampans and their pullaways and junks, they battened down the hatches on the crew within their bunks. Then Griddlebone, she gave a screech, for she was badly skeered. I am sorry to admit, but she quickly disappeared. She promptly escaped with ease. I'm sure she was not drowned. But a serried ring of flashing steel Growltiger did surround. The ruthless foe pressed forward in stubborn rank on rank. The Growltiger, to his vast surprise, was forced to walk the plank. He who 100 victims had driven to that drop, at the end of all his crimes, was forced to go kerflip, kerflop. Oh, there was joy and wapping when the news flew through the land. At Maidenhead and Henley there was dancing on the strand. Rats were roasted whole at Brentford and Victoria Dock, and a day of celebration was demanded in Bangkok. Next is the Rum-Tum Tugger. Now, in the musical, one thing I really enjoy about the musical is that they took their, you get a fair amount of characterization for each of these cats, but Andrew Lloyd Webber also took a lot of creative liberties as well. Because in this, so in the musical, Rum-Tum Tugger is kind of to put it lightly, he's a bit of a boisterous flirt. You don't really get that impression from the poem, I don't think. You just get him as someone who's just kind of like other aspects of the characterization you certainly get from this poem. So here we go. The Rum-Tum Tugger is a curious cat. If you offer him pheasant, he would rather have a grouse. If you put him in a house, he would much prefer a flat. If you put him in a flat, then he'd rather have a house. If you put him on a mouse, then he only wants a rat. If you set him on a rat, then he'd rather chase a mouse. Yes, the Rum-Tum Tugger is a curious cat, and there isn't any call for me to shout it, for he will do as he do, and there's no doing anything about it. The Rum-Tum Tugger is a terrible bore. When you let him in, then he wants to be out. He's always on the wrong side of every door. And as soon as he's at home, then he'd like to go get about. He likes to lie in the bureau drawer, but he makes such a fuss if he can't get out. Yes, the Rum-Tum Tugger is a curious cat, and it isn't any use for you to doubt it. For he will do as he do, and there is no doing anything about it. The Rum-Tum Tugger is a curious beast. His disobliging ways are a matter of habit. If you offer him fish, then he always wants a feast. When there isn't any fish, then he won't eat rabbit. If you offer him cream, then he sniffs and sneers, for he only likes what he finds for himself. So you'll catch him in it right up to his ears if you put it away on the larder shelf. The Rum-Tum Tugger is awful and knowing. The Rum-Tum Tugger doesn't care for a cuddle, but he'll leap on your lap in the middle of your sewing, where there's nothing he enjoys like a horrible muddle. Yes, the Rum-Tum Tugger is a curious cat, and there isn't any need for me to spout it, but he will do as he do, and there's no doing anything about it. So yeah, the whole thing about cats having a mind of their own, I like that. Here's another one. The next one is the Song of the Jellicles. Jellicle cats, come out tonight. Jellicle cats, come one, come all. Jellicle moon is shining bright. Jellicles come to the Jellicle ball. Jellicle cats are black and white. Jellicle cats are rather small. Jellicle cats are merry and bright, and pleasant to hear when they caterwaul. Jellicle cats have cheerful faces. Jellicle cats have bright black eyes. They like to practice their airs and graces and wait for the Jellicle moon to rise. Jellicle cats develop slowly. Jellicle cats are not too big. Jellicle cats are roly-poly. They know how to dance a gavotte and a jig. Until the Jellicle moon appears, they make their toilette and make their repose. Jellicles wash behind their ears. Jellicles dry between their toes. Jellicle cats are white and black. Jellicle cats are of moderate size. Jellicles jump like a jumping jack. Jellicle cats have moonlit eyes. They're quiet enough in the morning hours. They're quiet enough in the afternoon, reserving their terpsichorean powers to dance by the light of the Jellicle moon. Jellicle cats are black and white. Jellicle cats, as I said, are small. If it happens to be a stormy night, they will practice a caper or two in the hall. If it happens the sun is shining bright, you would say they had nothing to do at all. They are resting and saving themselves to be right for the Jellicle moon and the Jellicle ball. I think you can kind of even just reading these poems, you can see why Andrew Lloyd Webber chose the rhythm she did. You can just read this and say, Jellicle cats come out tonight. Jellicle cats come one, come all. That's just that's pretty much just how the poems go. And his music goes very well with the rhythms of the poems, which I really like. Mungo Jerry and Rumpleteazer. Mungo Jerry and Rumpleteazer were a very notorious couple of cats. As knockabout clowns, quick-change comedians, tightrope walkers, and acrobats, they had an extensive reputation. They made their home in Victoria Grove. That was merely their center of operation, for they were incurably given to rove. They were very well known in Cornwall Gardens, in Launceston Place, and in Kensington Square. They had really a little more reputation than a couple of cats can very well bear. If the area window was found ajar and the basement looked like a field of war, if a tile or two came loose on the roof, which presently ceased to be waterproof, if the drawers were pulled out from the bedroom chests and you couldn't find one of your winter vests, or after supper one of the girls suddenly missed her Woolworth pearls, then the family would say, "It's that terrible cat! It was Mungo Jerry!" or Rumpleteazer. And most of the time they left it at that. Mungo Jerry and Rumpleteazer had a very unusual gift of the gab. They were highly efficient cat burglars as well, and remarkably smart at a smash and grab. They made their home in Victoria Grove. They had no regular occupation. They were plausible fellows and liked to engage a friendly policeman in conversation. When the family assembled for Sunday dinner, when their minds made up that they wouldn't get thinner, on Argentine joint, potatoes and greens, and the cook would appear from behind the scenes and say in a voice that was broken in sorrow, "I'm afraid you must wait and have dinner tomorrow, for the joint has gone from the oven like that." Then the family would say, "It's that horrible cat! It was Mungo Jerry or Rumpleteazer." And most of the time they left it at that. Mungo Jerry and Rumpleteazer had a wonderful way of working together, and some of the time you would say with luck, and some of the time you would say it was weather. They would go through the house like a hurricane, and no sober person could take his oath. Was it Mungo Jerry or Rumple-Teazer? Or could you have sworn it mightn't be both? And when you heard a dining room smash, or up from the pantry there came a loud crash, or down from the library came a loud ping from a vase which was commonly said to be Ming, then the family would say, Now which was which cat? It was Mungo Jerry and Rumple-Teazer. And there was nothing at all to be done about that. Old Deuteronomy. Old Deuteronomy's lived a long time. He's a cat who has lived many lives in succession. He was famous in proverb and famous in rhyme a long while before Queen Victoria's accession. Old Deuteronomy's buried 9 wives and more. I am tempted to say 99. And his numerous progeny prospers and thrives, and the village is proud of him in his decline. At the sight of that placid and bland physiognomy, when he sits in the sun in the vicarage wall, the oldest inhabitant croaks, Well, of all things, can it be? Really? No. Yes. Oh my eye, my mind may be wandering, but I confess I believe it is old Deuteronomy. Old Deuteronomy sits on the street. He sits on the high street on market day. The bullocks may bellow, the sheep they may bleat, but the dogs and the herdsmen will turn them away. The cats and the lorries run over the curb, and the villagers put up a notice, road closed, so that nothing untoward may chance to disturb Deuteronomy's rest when he feels so disposed, or when he's engaged in domestic economy, and the oldest inhabitant croaks, Well, of all things, can it be? Really? No. Yes. Oh, hi, oh my eye. My sight's unreliable, but I can guess that the cause of the trouble is old Deuteronomy. Old Deuteronomy lies on the floor of the Fox and French Horn for his afternoon sleep. And when the men say, There's just time for one more, when the landlady from her back parlor will peep and say, Now then, out you go by the back door, for old Deuteronomy mustn't be awoken. I'll have the police if there's any uproar. And out they all shuffle, without a word spoken, and the digestive repose of that feline's gastronomy must never be broken, whatever befall. And the oldest inhabitant croaks, Well, of all things, can it be really? Yes, no. Oh my eye, my legs may be tottery, I must go slow, and be careful of old Deuteronomy. Of the awful battle of the Pecks and the Pollicles, together with some account of the participation of the Pugs and the Poms, and the intervention of the great Rumpus Cat. The Pecks and the Peaks, I guess. The Peaks and the Pollicles, everyone knows, are proud and implacable, passionate foes. It is always the same wherever one goes, and the Pugs and the Poms, although most people say that they do not like fighting, yet once in a way they will now and again join to the fray, and they bark, 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 until you can hear them all over the park. Now, on the occasion of which I shall speak, almost nothing had happened for nearly a week, and that's a long time for a Paul or a Peak. The big police dog was away from his beat. I don't know the reason, but most people think he'd slipped into the Wellington Arms for a drink, and no one at all was about on the street when a Peak and a Pollicle happened to meet. They did not advance or exactly retreat, but they glared at each other and scraped their hind feet and started to bark, 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 until you could hear them all over the park. Now, the Peak, although people may say what they please, is no British dog, but this is a bit unfortunate, but the poem says, but a heathen Chinese. But he was a Chinese, whatever. And so all the Peaks, when they heard the uproar, some came to the window, some came to the door. There were surely a dozen, more likely a score. and together they started to grumble and wheeze in their huffery-snuffery. Sorry, it bothers me when it says heathen Chinese there. So, huffery-snuffery Chinese. But a terrible din is what Pollicle's like, for your Pollicle dog is a dour Yorkshire tyke. Unless heathen Chinese is a type of dog. I'm not sure. Anyway, and his broad Scottish cousins are snappers and biters, and every dog jack of them notable fighters. And so they stepped out with their pipers in order, playing When the Blue Bonnets Came Over the Border. And then the pugs and the poms held no longer aloof, but came from the balcony. But some from the balcony, some from the roof, joined in to the din with a bark, 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 until you could hear them all over the park. Now, when these bold heroes together assembled, the traffic all stopped and the underground trembled, and some of the neighbors were so much afraid that they started to ring up the fire brigade. When suddenly, up from a small basement flat, why, who should stalk out but the great Rumpus Cat? His eyes were like fireballs, fearfully blazing. He gave out a yawn, and his jaws were amazing. And when he looked out through the bars of the area, you never saw anything fiercer or hairier. And what with the glare of his eyes and his yawning, the Peaks and the Pollicles quickly took warning. He looked at the sky, and he gave a great leap, and every last one of them scattered like sheep. And when the police dog returned to his beat, there wasn't a single one left on the street. Here's one that I like. Mr. Mistopheles. You want to know Mr. Mistopheles, the original conjuring cat. There can be no doubt about that. Please listen to me and don't scoff. All his inventions are off his own bat. There's no such cat in the metropolis. He holds all the patent monopolies for performing surprising illusions and creating eccentric confusions. At prestidigitation and legerdemain, he will defy examination and deceive your gain. The greatest magicians have something to learn from Mr. Mistopheles' conjuring turn. Presto! Away we go, and we all say, "Oh, well, I never! Was there ever a cat so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles?" He is quiet and small. He is black from his ears to the tip of his tail. He can creep through the tiniest crack. He can walk on the narrowest nail. He can pick any card from a pack. He's equally cunning with dice. He is always deceiving you into believing that he's only hunting mice. He can play any trick with a cork, or a spoon and a bit of fish paste. If you look for a knife or a fork, and you think it is merely misplaced, you have seen it one moment, and then it is gone. But you'll find it next week lying out on the lawn. And we all say, "Oh, well, I never. Was there ever a cat so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles?" His manner is vague and aloof. You would think there was nobody shyer. But when his voice has been heard on the roof, when he was curled up by the fire, and he's sometimes been heard by the fire, when he was out about on the roof. At least we all heard that somebody purred, which is incontestable proof of his singular magical powers, and I have known the family to call him in from the garden for hours while he was asleep in the hall. And not long ago, this phenomenal cat produced 7 kittens right out of a hat, and we all said, "Oh, well, I never." Did you ever know a cat so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles? Macavity the Mystery Cat. Macavity's a mystery cat. He's called the Hidden Paw, for he's the master criminal who can defy the law. He's the bafflement of Scotland Yard, the flying squad's despair, for when they reach the scene of the crime, Macavity is not there. Macavity, Macavity. There's no one like Macavity. He's broken every human law. He breaks the law of gravity. His powers of levitation would make a fakir stare. And when you reach the scene of the crime, Macavity's not there. You may seek him in the basement, you may look up in the air, but I tell you once and again, Macavity's not there. Macavity's a ginger cat. He's very tall and thin. You would know him if you saw him, for his eyes are sunken in. His brow is deeply lined with thought. His head is highly domed. His coat is dusty from neglect. His whiskers are uncombed. He sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake, and when you think he's half asleep, he's always wide awake. McCavity, McCavity. There's no one like McCavity, for he's a fiend in feline shape, a monster of depravity. You may meet him in a by-street, you may see him in the square, but when the crime's discovered, then McCavity's not there. He's outwardly respectable. They say he cheats at cards, and his footsteps are not found in any file of Scotland Yards. And when the larder's looted, or the jewel case is rifled, or when the milk is missing, or another peak's been stifled, or the greenhouse glass is broken, and the trellis past repair, why, there's the wonder of the thing. McCavity's not there. And when the Foreign Office find a treaty's gone astray, or the Admiralty lose some plans or drawings by the way, there may be a scrap of paper in the hall or on the stair, but it's useless to investigate. McCavity's not there. And when the loss has been disclosed, the Secret Service say, it must have been McCavity. But he's a mile away. You'll be sure to find him resting, or a licking of his thumbs, or engaged in doing complicated long division sums. McCavity. There's no one like McCavity. There never was a cat of such deceitfulness and suavity. He always has an alibi and one or two to spare. And whatever time the deed took place, McCavity wasn't there. And they say that all the cats whose wicked deeds are widely known, I might mention Mungo Jerry, I might mention Griddlebone, there's nothing more than agents for the cat who all the time just controls their operations. The Napoleon of crime. Let's see. Alright, got 4 more. Gus the theater cat. Gus is the cat at the theater door. His name, as I ought to have told you before, is apparently Asparagus. That's such a fuss to pronounce that we usually call him just Gus. His coat's very shabby. He's thin as a rake, and he suffers from palsy that makes his paws shake. Yet he was in his youth quite the smartest of cats, but no longer a terror to mice and to rats. For he isn't the cat that he was in his prime, though his name was quite famous, he says, in its time. And whenever he joins his friends at the club, which takes place at the back of the neighboring pub, he loves to regale them, if someone else pays, with anecdotes drawn from his palmiest days. For once he was a star of the highest degree. He has acted with Irving, he's acted with Tree, and he likes to relate his success on the halls where the gallery once gave him 7 catcalls. But his grandest creation, as he loves to tell, was Fire for Fiddle, the Fiend of the Fell. I have played, so he says, every possible part, and I used to know 70 speeches by heart. I extemporized backjat. I know how to gag. And I know how to let the cat out of the bag. I knew how to act with my back and my tail. With an hour of rehearsal I never could fail. I'd a voice that would soften the hardest of hearts whenever I took the lead or in character parts. I have sat by the bedside of poor little Nell when the curfew was rung. Then I swung on the bell. In the pantomime season I never fell flat, and once I understudied Dick Whittington's cat. But my grandest creation, as history will tell, was Fire for Fiddle, the Fiend of the Fell. Then, if someone will give him a toothful of gin, he will tell how he once played a part in East Lynne. At a Shakespearean performance, he once walked on Pat, when some actor suggested the need for a cat. He once played a tiger, could do it again, which an Indian colonel pursued down a drain. And he thinks that he still can, much better than most, produce blood-curdling noises to bring on the ghost. And he once crossed the stage on a telegraph wire to rescue a child when a house was on fire. And he says, now, these kittens, they do not get trained as we did in the days when Victoria reigned. They never get drilled in a regular troop, and they think they are smart, just to jump through a hoop. And he'll say as he scratches himself with his paws, well, The theater's certainly not what it was. These modern productions are all very well, but there's nothing to equal, from what I hear tell, that moment of mystery when I made history as fire for a fiddle, the fiend of the fell. And that's that. I really like that one. Here's another fun one. Bustopher Jones, the cat about town. Bustopher Jones is not skin and bones. In fact, he's remarkably fat. He doesn't haunt pubs. He has 8 or 9 clubs, for he's the St. James's street cat. He's the cat we all greet as he walks down the street in his coat of fastidious black. No commonplace Mousers have such well-cut trousers or such an impeccable back. In the whole of St. James, the smartest of names is the name of this Brummel of cats. And we're all of us proud to be nodded or bowed to by Bustopher Jones in white spats. His visits are occasional to the senior educational, and it is against the rules for any one cat to belong both to that and the joint superior schools. For a similar reason, when game is in season, he is found not at Fox's, but Blimp's. He is frequently seen at the gay stage and screen, which is famous for wrinkles and shrimps. In the season of venison, he gives his venison to the pot hunter's succulent bones, and just before noon's not a moment too soon to stop in for a drink at the Drones. When he's seen in a hurry, there's probably curry at the Siamese or at the Glutton. If he looks full of gloom, then he's lunched at the Tomb on cabbage, rice pudding, and mutton. So much in this way passes Bustopher's day at one club or another he's found. It can be no surprise that under our eyes he has grown unmistakably round. He's a 25-pounder, or I'm a bounder, and he's putting on weight every day. But he's so well preserved because he's observed all his life a routine, so he'll say. Or, to put it in rhyme, I shall last out my time, is the word of this stoutest of cats. It must and it shall be spring and Pall Mall, while Bustopher Jones wears white spats. Skimbleshanks the railway cat. There's a whimper down the line at 11:39 when the night mail's ready to depart, saying, "Skimble, where's Skimble? Has he gone to hunt the thimble? We must find him or the train can't start." All the guards and all the porters at the station and the station master's daughters, they are searching high and low, saying, "Skimble, where's Skimble? For unless he's very nimble, then the night mail just can't go." At 11:42, when the scale's nearly due and the passengers are frantic to a man, then Skimble will appear, and he'll saunter to the rear. He's been busy in the luggage van. He gives one flash of his glass-green eyes, and the signal goes, "All clear!" And we're off at last for the northern part of the northern hemisphere. You may say that by and large it is Skimble who is in charge of the sleeping car express. From the driver and the guards to the bagman playing cards, he will supervise them all, more or less. Down the corridor he paces and examines all the faces of the travelers in the first and in the third. He establishes control by a regular patrol, and he'd know at once if anything occurred. He will watch you without winking, and he sees what you are thinking, and it's certain that he doesn't approve of hilarity and riot, so the folk are very quiet when Skimble is about and on the move. You can play no pranks with Skimbleshanks. He's a cat that cannot be ignored, so nothing goes wrong on the Northern Mail when Skimbleshanks is aboard. Oh, it's very pleasant when you have found your little den with your name written up on the door, and the berth is very neat with a newly folded sheet, and there's not a speck of dust on the floor. There's every sort of light. You can make it dark or bright, and there's a handle that you turn to make a breeze. And there's a funny little basin you're supposed to wash your face in, and a crank to shut the window if you sneeze. Then the guard looks in politely and will ask you very brightly, "Do you like your morning tea weak or strong?" But Skimble's just behind him and was ready to remind him, for Skimble won't let anything go wrong. And when you creep into your cozy berth and pull up the counterpane, You ought to reflect that it's very nice to know that you won't be bothered by mice. You can leave all that to the railway cat, the cat of the railway train. In the watches of the night he is always fresh and bright. Every now and then he has a cup of tea, with perhaps a drop of scotch while he's keeping on the watch, only stopping here and there to catch a flea. You were fast asleep at Crewe, and so you never knew that he was walking up and down the station. You were sleeping all the while he was busy at Carlisle, while he greets the station master with elation. But you saw him at Dumfries, where he speaks to the police if there's anything they ought to know about. When you get to Gallowgate, you do not have to wait for Skimbleshanks will help you to get out. He gives you a wave of his long brown tail, which says, "I'll see you again. You'll meet without fail. I'll see you again. You'll meet without fail on the midnight mail. The cat of the railway train." That, like many other songs in the musical, is very fun. And now we finally reach the last one. The addressing of cats. You've read, or I guess in this case you've heard, of several kinds of cats. And my opinion now is that you should need no interpreter to understand their character. You now have learned enough to see that cats are much like you and me, and other people whom we find possessed of various types of mind. For some are sane, and some are mad, and some are good, and some are bad, and some are better, some are worse. But all may be described in verse. You've seen them at work and games, and learnt about their proper names, their habits, and their habitat. But how would you address a cat? So first, your memory all jog and say, a cat is not a dog. Now, dogs pretend they like to fight. They often bark, more seldom bite. But yet, a dog is, on the whole, what you would call a simple soul. And of course, I'm not including peaks and such fantastic canine freaks. The usual dog about the town is much inclined to play the clown, and far from showing too much pride, is frequently undignified. He's very easily taken in. Just chuck him underneath the chin, or slap his back, or shake his paw, and he will gambol and guffaw. He's such an easygoing lout. He'll answer any hail or shout. And again, I must remind you that a dog's a dog. A cat's a cat. With cats, some say one rule is true. Don't speak until you are spoken to. Myself, I do not hold with that. I say you should address a cat. But always keep in mind that he resents familiarity. I bow, and taking off my hat, address him in this form. "Oh, cat." But if he is the cat next door, whom I have often met before, he comes to see me in my flat, I greet him with an "Oops, a cat." I think I've heard them call him James, but we've not got so far as names. Before a cat will condescend to treat you as a trusted friend, some little token of esteem is needed, like a dish of cream, and you might now and then supply some caviar or Strasbourg pie, some potted grouse or salmon paste. He's sure to have his personal taste. I know a cat who makes a habit of eating nothing else but rabbit, and when he's finished, licks his paws so as not to waste the onion sauce. A cat's entitled to expect these evidences of respect, and so in time you reach your aim, and finally call him by his name. So this is this, and that is that. And there's how you address a cat. So yeah, there you go. That is all of the poems in the published form of Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. I know there are one or two other poems that T.S. Eliot wrote for this that never got published with the collection, but was shared with Andrew Lloyd Webber to help with the creation of the musical. But yeah, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm still taking requests, by the way. I'll do requests again like later this week. But I only have one request so far to read or whatever. So if there's a story or a poem or something you want me to share or read, I'll take requests later this week. I'll do requests later this week. But for now, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until next time, all the best.